everyone. It's Lisa Huppert from Serenity Grove Wellness Center. I'm about to head down to my art space and do some work with my exotic papers, maybe do a rip paper collage. Why don't you come along and see what I'm about to create.
Okay, so I'm getting ready to do a rip paper collage piece. I've got my flat canvas board, my perfect paper adhesives, got a little stencil brush that I like to use to spread the adhesive with, a sponge brush for bigger pieces of paper, a little styrofoam tray to pour the glue onto, the adhesive onto, and then I've got a whole stash of exotic papers that I'm going to rip apart and collage to make some creation down here. We'll see what forms as I start. So I've got my music wired into my ears, ready to begin. So come along and watch me create.
Audio Jungle.
Exhausting working that fast, but now I have my background to my collage piece. Kind of like it. It's got a little flow going there, and I'm going to work on what I'm going to put in the foreground and see if I can pull something together here. Got a little vision forming, so we'll see what happens. So stick with me and see what I create.
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit in slow motion so I can explain a little bit what's going on. I have a vision and it requires my hands to be like this in the picture. So I did my best to kind of like draw out a little outline here with a little detail in there that I'm going to fill in with some ripped paper to try and get the fingers and the thumbnail in there. But in order to rip this, because it's a little more detailed, I'm going to use something called a water brush. See, it's this brush. It's got got a nice tip that's kind of like a brush tip on it, and water comes down through it. And when I brush it on the paper, I'm soaking the paper in a line where I want the tear to be. So this gives me a little more of a exact tear, so to speak, in the paper, still giving it that ripped look. So if I soak this line, I'll give you a little, it's going to tear along that line. And being that this is homemade paper, it's got a lot of fibers in it, so it's going to need a little bit more than one little soak to it as I go through. But this is the color paper I want. I want this texture, so it's not going to be exact, but I'm going to do my best here. These brushes are great for paper collage to get that little extra detail, more fine detail tear along a certain line that you want, but you still want that kind of rough, really nice edge to it. So that's what I'm going to be working on. I'm going to be taking this hand, ripping it out, and then I'm going to play with putting some colored paper in here, offer some shading, see what I can do with paper before I go through, and maybe use a little colored pencil in there as well. And we'll see what happens. So that's a little quick description of what I'll be doing with this brush. All right, let's put it into fast motion.
is where I am right now in the project. The hands are done. They're on the background, and now I'm adding some other pieces to it to complete my vision. So stick with me and let's see how it turns out. So this is where the project stands right now. I've glued on all the papers I think I'm going to be gluing on. Maybe something will come as an inspired idea as I finish it up, but I have taken my X-Acto knife and trimmed off any papers that went beyond the edge of my canvas board. It's important to use a sharp instrument in which to do that, an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors. I wouldn't rip it, especially if you're working with exotic papers. A lot of them have fibers in it, and the fibers are hard to rip, so they might end up ripping into your project, and that wouldn't be good. So I like what I have so far. I have the hands emitting some energy, the energy separating out into the colors of the rainbow, which also represent the chakras of the body, as well as the auric layers, and the colors that those also represent. So I would like the hands to stand out a little bit more from the background. So I think I might do a little shading around the outside with a colored pencil or a chalk pencil, and do some smudging around that to create a shadow behind it. So I'll set up my camera and I'll do a little bit of that, and you can see how that goes. Okay, so I'm going to do this in regular motion rather than wicked fast, because it'll be done in a blink of an eye. One nice thing about having a little art space is I have a lot of little tools I can use and play with, and one of them is my pastel or chalk pencils. I love them. I'm using the black from my set, from this set here, to create a little shadow, and then I'm using this stub blender to kind of, once I lay the line around the hands, kind of just blending it out to create like a shadow behind it. So hopefully it'll pop those hands out a little bit better from the background. I like to blend as I go, because I tend to put my hands down on the project, and if it's not blended in, I'm going to pick up the chalk on my hand and then I'm going to smudge as I go. So I rather blend as I go, less chance of smudging, so that I like. You could use a soft graphite pencil too to do this kind of smudging or shadow detail if you wanted. You don't have to have chalk pencils or pastel pencils to do that. I just happen to have them because I work with them as because I enjoy mixing the medias onto each of my pieces. So often I will use paper, I will use maybe ink, maybe colored pencil, maybe even paint. Don't use a lot of paint, but I'm getting more and more into that, I have to say. But I do love my chalks. At any given time, my chalks and my inks, at any given time, I will have very messy hands if I'm creating in my art space. So just have to have a lot of baby wipes around to kind of wipe your hands off before you move on to your next step. Paper towels, sink nearby, not a bad idea. By blending it too, it takes that darker black and it's not making it so stark, making it more smudged. See here I got a little darker than I'd like. I just crack some of it off. There we go.
better. I think I might even do that. I'm not going to really use a pencil per se in here, but I will use my smudge stick to kind of like spread a little bit of that shadow in there. Don't necessarily want to have it separated from the energy coming from the hands, being that, you know, Serene Grove Wellness Center is about energy healing and energy work as well. One of the nice things about creating, whether you're artistic or not, you don't have to create anything that looks like something or means anything in particular to anybody else. Just for you, what, you know, the colors you want to work with, the images you see, even if they're stick figures, they're your creation. And just the act of creating is healing. It definitely has been shown to reduce stress in people, particularly if you're given the freedom to create without judgment. And here, when we do expressive art for healing, or SoulCollage, or any of the art stuff, there is no judgment there at all. It's just what is within inside of you that needs to come out and be shared with you first, not necessarily with anybody else. Okay, so now that I have the shadow, I'm noticing that I'd like to have a little more definition within the fingers themselves. So I'm going to take this gray chalk, which I had used a chalk block before, not a pencil, to deliver some of the little more detail in here, just so it could be seen as fingers, separate fingers. I'm just going to kind of put the knuckles in there for the thumb. My lovely thumb ring. There we go. Gave myself pretty nail polish on the nail. Toying with the idea of putting the symbol for Reiki on this. Not sure if I'm going to do that or not. Got some nice shading going on. I think that looks a little bit better. You can see that. There we go. Better, better, better. So I like that a little bit better. One last thing to do when you're working with this is to do one final coating of the adhesive, whatever adhesive you're using. Again, it needs to be adhesive that will dry clear. I'm using a matte adhesive. There are adhesives out there that have gloss to them if you wanted a gloss finish. I prefer the matte. So I'm going to cover my whole piece with adhesive one last time. This kind of secures it all together. Those little pieces that might be sticking up will be glued down, so that's nice. And it's kind of like a seal too for the project, particularly if you use any other media on there. I use chalk, so this will seal in the chalk so it can't be rubbed off, which is nice. Doesn't have to be a thick coating, just enough to kind of hold it down, hold it all together. Stroking the way I want my papers to lay. I don't know if you noticed that. I'm not going to stroke in the opposite direction. It could peel it back up because I am dampening the paper again. Most likely it won't, but why take chances? And just a little bit more over on this side. And there we go. One finished ripped paper collage piece. I'm going to get around the edges a little bit so they don't peel off the edge. I can frame this. I can put it on an easel stand as is. But I think I'll take it to the Rip Paper Collage class I'm teaching and use it as an example. So, hope you enjoyed coming along for the creation of this. I don't know, I kind of like it. I'll call it my energy hand piece. Anyway, thanks for creating with me, and hope to see you again in the